Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:32. This meeting, is it being broadcast live?
No.
This meeting is being digitally recorded. Okay, open session. Anyone here for open session?
Yeah.
Hi.
Mark
No,
Kent.
John has license?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're not open session, sorry.
Anyone else here for open session? No? Okay.
Okay, first item is the 33 Ragged Hill Road situation with their driveway. We
Yep.
have the estimate, which you have in your packet. And so, we'll take a look at it again, if it's so already. And Tim is here in case you have any questions.
Yeah, and that's the Ranger here.
Try the TV.
Go right ahead.
Okay. One, am I clear in understanding that at Ragged Hill, this was not caused by us? Number one. And secondly, my other concern is looking at the cost estimates. Are we liable to be setting a precedent here? What happens if all of a sudden we have a bad winter and somebody else's driveway or somebody else's burn gets chipped or something? Are we now going to be setting ourselves up for picking up the cost of everybody who wants to come in and say that we've damaged their driveway? Because that's something that concerns me.
Anyone else want to comment? Okay, well, I mean, we've done, it's been 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever it's been. From our side, we gathered data, just sort of re-summarizing how we went through this. We interviewed the responsible parties who were involved as the contractor and the engineer and all the records we had as a town on what was done. Tried to bring the process to full fruition as far as doing the investigatory work on it. So the most recent thing we did, which was get an estimate. Tim, you went down there with somebody and got an estimate?
Yes.
And that's what we looked at here, and then we've sort of, not strayed away from the fact that you guys did sign off on what was actually done, and it being so many years later, I don't think, I don't know if you guys can chime in as well, but I think, beyond an apron, I don't know that there's much we can do.
The regrading needs to be done, and that's caused by not having the apron and not putting the original drain in where it was supposed to be.
I think,
And
however,
had we not been strong-armed, I wouldn't have signed it, which I shouldn't have signed.
unfortunately, we weren't really involved, and I know you don't want to hear that,
All right,
but
we'll just get our attorney involved, that's all. I hate to have to go this way, but I've been fighting with the town for 25 years over drainage. And if this is the way we have to go, then we'll have to go that way. I'll have the easement taken off my property. I don't care. Why should I have it? I did you guys a favor by having it on my property. And this is what we get. Typical town move. Typical town move.
So the only thing that wasn't completed for when you signed off was the 2 aprons.
And the drain wasn't where it was supposed to be. The drain where they're doing now does nothing.
But you signed off on it. You signed off on it as when it was completed.
A week later, or almost 2 weeks later,
After we were contacted by the town administrator at the time, and basically said, the work is done, you need to sign it. It wasn't,
You made no notation. You didn't come forward to the town 3 years ago.
I'll go around here. I knew this was gonna happen. Typical town move. Thanks for all the help.
How much?
Our taxes come in.
What's the estimate?
$9,000.
9,000.
I'm gonna tell you.
Okay,
Next item is what I'm asking the board is to instill and approve a winter parking ban for the Slade Building parking lot for November 15th to April 15th. We do have some overnight parking that does happen, and if it continues during the winter time, the DPW will not be able to clear the parking lot. So
so what's the process? Signage and towing?
signage and towing fines. So there is a bylaw, but it's for the streets, and that's, what was the date for the bylaw on the streets?
December 1 to March 31st inclusive.
Right, so that's for streets. This would be specific to the Slade Building parking lot.
Well, other than the police, who uses it overnight?
There's some residents that use it, maybe they have 2 vehicles, and so they leave one in the Slade
Really?
Building.
Doesn't Mass Highway pack in there sometimes too, because they can't take the truck home,
Right.
so that's
Yeah,
your
there is a
instructed.
DOT truck that does parking now.
And the main driving force of this is safety.
Right, we will be able to clean the parking lot. And especially if we need to use the parking lot to drop off kids in the morning,
Yep.
if the DPW is clearing it in part of the school, we can have a means to have it cleared.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
So just make a motion and approve, and
Make a motion to approve the winter parking ban as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
next we have an approval, excuse me, of a public information request form. We're getting inundated with public records requests, and so this sort of, there's other towns that use this form, and so I use a similar format to theirs, and it will just bring a little more organization to the requests. And then the second page is just an outline, brief outline of what changes will take place January 1st due to the new public records law.
I make a motion to approve the public records request form as presented.
Second it.
Just, why January 1st?
That's just when it takes effect.
Meaning,
The new public records law takes effect January 1st.
so this is,
This form can be used tomorrow.
yeah,
So if you want to do 2 approvals, one to approve the form as of now, and then this is just an information form.
I'd like to do that.
All right, I'll make a motion, amend my motion to approve the request for public records form effective immediately, and then the subsequent explanation of request for public records to be approved January 1st, 2017 in compliance with new state law.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we have some appointments and wage authorizations. There's 2 appointments, Cultural Council, Tom and Laura Yoko, and then we have election workers as presented on the list I believe Tony gave to you. And then 2 wage authorizations, Christine Boldick, Police Admin Assistant, and Kristen Noah, Tax Collector and Treasurer.
Do any of these need to be waived?
No.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the appointments and wage authorizations as presented.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
And then next we have licenses. We have one for the Hubbardston Rod and Gun Club with change of manager for the liquor license. We have Kent Brothers Sales and Service, which is a change of name for a Class 2 license. And we have Big Ed's Kitchen, which is a common, so.
This is like the 3rd or 4th time in recent times that we've done this.
The state, as far as Rod and Gun, every time we present it to them, here you go, this is great, they come back and say, no, this needs to be typed,
Oh.
or, and then he didn't have his officers up to date, so we had to do that again, so hopefully this is the last time.
All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the licenses as presented.
Second it.
All in favor? Discussion, all in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Over here now.
Just for all of us, or just Dan?
Yes, oh, you need to sign all of them.
So they're separate, yeah,
No, that's all one packet.
okay. That's the only thing to
That's all
sign?
for the rod and gun, no, for the rod and gun, yes.
Yep, and then these, yeah, okay,
And these.
fine.
Just 3?
That's it, then, right?
I know, I saw, Avery knows that.
Okay, so now I'm gonna turn it over to Eric Kinship and Amy Dela Roche for our financial forecasts.
Well, good evening. I'm Eric Kinshirf, and this is, Amy. And we're fortunate enough to get a contract with the town to do a 5-year financial forecast. And luckily, this was paid for by the state community compact grant. This tool is basically, it's meant to be used by the Board of Selectmen, the Financial Advisory Committee, the Town Administrator. So you can see how different variables affect your budget. So instead of looking at the budget from 1 year at a time, you can look at the big picture, and you'll see that we separated things out like the operating budget and the capital budget. It's really like a great tool. It's not an exact science, obviously. We call it like a fluid document. But you'll see how different variables change different things. And we can go forward. So, basically, like, one of the questions is like, what good is the financial forecast? Like, why are we even doing this? And as you're entrusted to manage the town's finances, the 4 components of management are planning, organizing, influencing, and controlling. So without a forecast, you really can't plan. So this is going to enable you to plan. We've organized the data in such a way that you can, get organized. And once you know that, then you guys will be able to make decisions on what you want to do. Like, this is the different scenarios. Like, this is what the town needs. This is what we can afford. And what can we do to make those two things balance? So as far as the questions go, like, as a team, we have a great team here. Kristen Knoll, the treasurer collector, so I congratulated her on her appointment. She just appointed her. Amy Dela Roche, she's the town accountant. She's the one that put this PowerPoint together and that excellent slide right there, so I'm really appreciative of that. She does a great job. And then Rayanne Siegel, she is obviously the new town administrator. So we met as a group, and these are the questions that we came up with. And question 1 is, can we as a town, I'm not even from the town, but I consider myself part of a de facto member, can we afford to sustain the current level of services that we have in future years? What are the projected revenues and expenses? How much can we afford in capital purchases? For example, you guys voted a capital exclusion for an ambulance because you guys felt you needed a $250,000 ambulance. So the fact that we did a forecast, we've actually projected out expenses through the next 5 to 10 years of different things you might need, and that way you guys can plan on a way to pay for those. Another thing is, should we borrow for these capital purchases, or can we afford to borrow? This forecast will answer those type of questions. Your treasurer collector is involved with that. And do we have a forecast for both operating and infrastructure needs? At the time we started, we didn't, but now we do have one. So the way we kind of put this thing together was, it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that hard. We had like 3 years of historical data, just the actual budgets that you actually vote each year at town meeting. And we set up the template like that. And then we created variables within the budgets, like, school, salaries, and we tied those variables to components in the budget. So the idea is, if you change one variable, you can see how it's going to affect the budget like 5 years down the road. And I was joking around with Rayanne, like, we did the forecast, we did the FY18 budget. We're like, hey, you already did the FY18 budget. No need to even go through it. But obviously, that's not the case. But the idea of this tool, which everybody will have it available to them, as you're going through different things, you'll say, well, what if the schools cut 3%? How would that affect the budget? What if we did this and that? And you'll be able to see how you can get the budget balanced. this is kind of like the end result. We met as a financial team, we met like 3 or 4 different times. It seems like we started about 6 months ago. We started a while ago. It was even predated Rayanne when Anita was here. She's the one that I think received like the grant money. So you can go to the next slide. All right, so next slide. One of my goals was to just simplify like the budgeting, like basically where's the money coming from and where does it go. So as you can see here, 8 out of every $10 that the town gets comes from your real estate taxes and personal property taxes. A smaller component, only like 15%, comes from local receipts, and the big parts of your local receipts are your motor vehicle excises in that category, and you guys have like $300,000 a year that comes in payment in lieu of taxes. And other receipts would be like building inspector fees, town clerk fees. That all makes up that 15%. And then the smallest component is the state aid. It's only 6%. In a lot of towns, that could be like a third. I worked for the city of Brockton. It was like 2/3 of the budget was the state aid. But one of the reasons it's so low in Hubbardston is because a lot of the state aid is driven by the school system. And since you have a regional school system, that state aid that's earmarked for the different towns in the district, that goes directly to the school district. So when they do their budget, they count on that state aid, then they assess you guys the difference after the state aid comes in. So here we go.
Quick question.
Sure.
10 years ago, I'm just asking you off the cuff here. 10 years ago, what did those percentages look like? Would you guess?
Oh, as far, I would say there would probably, I'd say the property tax was, if I had to guess,
Yeah.
I'd say the property tax was like a little bit lower.
Yeah.
The state aid was a little bit bigger. And the reason I say that is because, as you can see, the local receipts, the state aid's been kind of like level the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I think the percentage that fell on the property tax has gotten larger over time. And unfortunately, I'm pretty old, fairly old, so like 10 years ago, I was like a finance director, actually 15 years ago, when a finance director in a town, we had to cut $6 million in the budget. I was a finance director in Braintree. So I remember seeing all this. Hubbardston's kind of insulated from like cuts in state aid. When Braintree got cut in state aid, they had to cut $2 million from the budget. But with Hubbardston, if there's a state aid cut, it's going to be like a minimal effect. So it's a two-edged sword. I mean, you're not really impacted that much by state aid cuts, and that's kind of a good thing. On the other hand, you don't get much state aid coming in, so that's that.
Thanks.
And basically with this, one thing about working in Braintree, the guy always says, graphically depict what you're going to kind of explain. But what this graph is the purple is the revenue. So we show a steady increase going up, the total revenue coming into the town projected from 18 to 22. And then the green line is the property tax, which is, you can see that's a big portion of the revenue that's coming in. Blue's the state aid, the red's the local receipts. So that basically just graphically depicts. This slide here just shows like the property tax increases that we're projecting. We're including 2.5% plus new growth. And we'll talk about new growth after, but new growth is like new development. So if you have new developments in town, it's the extra revenue that new development generates in taxes. That gets added to the tax levy. So that chart there just shows the perspective, and this is like the local, go ahead, that's fine. That's fine. You can go local receipts, like I said, this is basically predominantly, motor vehicle excise, payment in lieu of taxes, all the departmental revenues. We projected, like a 1% increase going forward. And as you can see, that little pie in the corner, that's only 15% of your total revenues. And then this next chart's going to be the state aid. Same thing, we did a 2.5% increase over time. And you can see this is the smallest component. So that's where the money comes from. So to summarize, 80% of the revenue comes from property taxes. 15% comes from local receipts, which the main components are the motor vehicle excise and the payment in lieu of taxes. State aid accounts for only 6%, the smallest piece of the pie. And on average, the revenue increases range from 1 to 2.5% per year. So we'll just keep that little thought in mind, between 1 and 2.5%. So, all right, we talked about where the money comes from, property taxes, state aid, local receipts. This is where the money is going. The blue, the biggest component, is education, which is 58%. I believe that's the Quabbin assessment plus the Monty Tech assessment. So $5.80 out of every $10 goes to education. The next biggest category, well, we have some unclassified, that includes health insurance and what have you, but we have police and fire. Police is 7%, fire is 6%, public works is 9%. So this basically this is the pie that shows where your budget is going and where it's allocated to. This is important because, a 1%, a 5% increase, say, in the fire budget is going to cause less of a problem than 5% in the education budget because it's a bigger part of the budget. And we'll show you that when we get to the tools. So basically, this is where the money's going. This chart right here, this is in the tool right here. So these are all the different variables, and each colored line ties to a section in the budget. So every line item in your budget, it's color-coded. So if we put 2.5% in there for salaries, the budget's automatically going to change like an 2.5% in the variables each year. See, we put in for projections like 6% increase in Quabbin for next year and going forward, and that's based upon some discussions the financial team has had with Quabbin themselves. Another big part is, I think we have the health insurance in there, 9%, and that's based upon some analysis that your treasurer, collector, and your accountant have done. These things can be changed as better information becomes known, but it's a good tool, and especially like in contract negotiations, say you're negotiating with the police or fire, and you can say, well, what's the effect if we offer X, Y, and Z? You can just put those numbers in, you can see how it's going to affect the budget in future years. So these are the variables in the expenses. This, like the revenues, this just graphically depicts the expenses. The orange is the total expenses. The light blue is the education. So you can see education is like the biggest part of your budget. And the off-color blue is like the general government functions, and that's the smallest part of the budget. So basically this just graphically depicts your expenses. Okay. We graphed out your future debt service, and your debt service is actually going down. And what debt service is it means it's the payments on the debt that you have. So it's almost like if you had a first and second mortgage, maybe your second mortgage is going to be paid next year and the variable rate's going down. So the reason this is important is when we developed your capital budget, what we did was, whatever that level was in FY18, I think it was like $330,000, we allocated the drops in that debt service budget as a revenue source to fund your capital budget, your capital budget. So in essence, your debt service is going to kind of remain level, and the drop-offs, that money that's available, is a source to fund some of your capital projects that you want to do. So you can go ahead. So what do we know about the expenditures? And this is probably like one of the key things. We saw the revenues were pretty steady, 1%, 2.5% over time, which is nice, steady increase. But the problem is that when you have 2.5% increase in revenue or 2%, and you have 6% increase in expenses, obviously over time, the budget gaps gets larger and larger. And this isn't unique to Hubbardston, this is everywhere. I mean, you've been talking about this for 20 years in municipal government, but that's kind of what we know about the expenditures. So we talk about revenue, talk about expenditures. And based upon some variables that we put in for FY18, we're showing a shortfall for FY18 of $365,000, but this is just a tool. This is not to be alarmist, but basically, when we put in these variables in the budget, this is what we came up with, revenue and expenses. So as you develop the budget this year, at least you have a starting point, and you'll have a starting point to make decisions, like either way, what you're gonna do about the budget. And then, over time, we projected out 19, 20, 21, 22. That shortfall increases over time, and that's just a function of the revenues go up 2.5%, the expenses go up 6 to 10%. That's naturally gonna happen. So that's what happens. So go to the next slide. You know, revenues, expenditures, they determine the ability to deliver services. So whatever those services may be, you know, big part of your budget's the school. So if they have less money, they have less teachers, the class size is bigger. If the police have less money, they have less people. There might be, you know, one person on the shift on the weekend instead of two. That type of thing. It goes without saying, these are just numbers on a page, what we're doing, but your job is to kind of, you'll know the impact of what these numbers actually mean, because they do mean things. The forecast demonstrates the structural imbalance between available revenue and the cost, and I've said it about 5 times, but it is true. Like the structural deficit is when your revenues are going up at a slower rate than your expenses. You know, something has to be done. Like I said, that just kind of reiterates. I like that little. That little graphic there. That's what a deficit looks like getting crunched. But go ahead, next slide. All right, this is. I really like this slide right here, because in our forecast we put a disciplined approach by taking advantage of the debt service, keeping it level, to use that as a funding source. So what we're able to do is use that as a funding source, and Rayanne was able to give us capital expenditures going out to FY25, like projected. Like we looked at, like Rayanne asked, why is it going down in FY24? That's because we had a projected new fire engine that was needed for like 500,000 or so. So we have detail that backs this up. But what this shows us is that, like in FY18, the capital is the capital requests are greater than the revenues to support it in FY18. But this is where we get the treasurer involved, and they say, all right, well maybe we could borrow that money. Where are we going to get the money to borrow? All those amounts of money that are available in future years, that's when we'll make the payments on them. So this is how that tool works. And we can go to the next slide. So why is capital important? Because some people would say we have a $365,000 deficit. We're using, you know, $300,000 for capital. Why don't we just not fund the capital and fund the operating budget? Towns that usually do that, you can do that, but over time you're not going to have any infrastructure. You're not going to have any new vehicles. You're not going to have any things getting fixed. So that's a decision that that you'll have to make. But I think this forecast shows a steady revenue stream that supports investment in the long-term infrastructure needs of the town. So like you said, we have police cruisers, fire engines, ambulance, plow trucks, street sweepers, backhoes, building improvements, roof repair, handicap accessible. Like I said, deferring capital purchase will result in a financial impact in the future. So, you know, I'm sure the DPW doesn't want to go out, you know, with a 15-year-old truck trying to plow the roads or whatever. So that's something that you'll have to take in consideration. So as far as recommendations go, I just want you to be aware, we gave you the tools in place, but some of the, you have to increase either revenues or cut the expenses, you know, either way. So the revenues, like as far as new growth goes, the way to develop new growth is, I don't know if you have like an economic plan, or if there's certain sections of the town, if you have new proposals, new projects. One of the considerations when you have new projects, whether you're considering to accept them or not, is how much additional tax revenue is it going to bring in. So that's one factor. The other factor obviously is the impact on the quality of life, but just to weigh those two things out, and this tool will allow you to do that. As far as, economic development goes, the tools, if you have a community improvement plan, tax relief program, business improvement, take a look at your zoning bylaws, that type of thing, just to see if it's conducive to new growth, or to see if you even want new growth. Maybe you don't want any new growth, and that's fine. You'll just have to include that in the forecast that, you don't want any new tax growth. Can you go back one slide just for a second? Just wanted to,
No, and just to piggyback on what you were saying, we did run different scenarios as a team. We recommended saying, okay, what happens if how much new growth we can put in place, because we have a worksheet that will actually show you in the tool. You can run different scenarios of how factors change and how it will be an impact. But we did find through running them, we thought, hey, we'll just put for instance, a mall in Hubbardston, that will solve all our problems. Well, it really didn't. You'd have to, have something like an airport, or I'm just using that jokingly, but it took a combination of different types of revenues. There wasn't just one solution to it, which we thought what would be, and that would solve our problems, just the new growth piece of it. But that really did work out, and we did run those scenarios, so we can talk about that later.
Yep.
We were talking about the two-way.
Yep, absolutely. The other thing is, like, on the expenditure side, I know the towns has like regionalized opportunities. If sometimes they share certain positions. Like, what things that do you share now with other towns?
Right now we have dispatch, animal control, some of the minor ones.
So, that's a good example of a money saver. I was just working today in the town of Barnstable, and they actually have, it's all like the opposite of regionalization. They have like little districts, and they have fire districts. So they basically have like 5 fire chiefs, 5 deputy chiefs, because they have little districts. So regionalization is like the opposite of that. Sharing like one superintendent for 5 towns instead of 2, and so forth. All right, so we can go forward and go to the next one. All right.
So we're going to look at the tool?
Yes, we're going to actually look at this tool. I'm going to do a couple samples, and then we can...
Do you want to walk through the tool first before you do the samples?
Well, let's...
Or how do you want it?
All right, let's look at the... that's the variables right there. And then look at the expense forecast for a second. Look at that figure right there, that $366,000, which is like a projected shortfall. So let's see, can you go to the variables right now? So say if you change that, say the school needed 10% next year. And now go back to the forecast. So it goes from 366 to 537,000, so it increases the whole budget. Now, can you go back to the variables again and change that back to 6? And then just say, let's look at the salaries, that 2.5%. Change that to 0 and see how that just affects it. Now go back to the forecast. So it saved $10,000. So if you cut it, so basically the idea of this is to, you can change that back. Different scenarios that you have, you can put them in, and it'll see how it affects the budget. So each one of these variables ties to that expense forecast sheet. Now, can you go to the effect on the tax rate form right there? Okay. So we were thinking, like, if there's if there was a $2.2 million new development in town, how much taxes would that generate? And right there it says, like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'll just say it. $2.2 million new development will generate $35,000 in new taxes. So you think a $2.2 million would be pretty good. So if you had a $10 million development.
Sorry, I did too big.
That's okay. This is.
There you go.
Okay, so like, now, let's say if there was a proposed, $5 million project, so can you just put in $5 million? Yeah. Which is pretty big. That'd bring an extra $80,000 a year in revenue, recurring revenue. So that's good, but it's like Amy was saying, it doesn't solve the whole problem. It's only like part of a solution. And can you go up just one further, just a little bit up right here? Okay, so 6.2 million in tax rate per thousand. All right. So go down just a little bit further. That's on the tax bill value of home. Okay, so that's fine. I'm just gonna. This tool here also gives you like what the effect on different overrides would be on like the value of a $250,000 home. If you were considering an override, you'd be able to tell right away how that would be affected. Now, can you go to the capital forecast?
So throughout this tool as well, when you're changing numbers in the tool, all the graphs that are embedded in the tool are going to change with you. So if you ever want to change numbers and then just pull those graphs off for a quick presentation in a meeting you might have coming up that you want to be an advocate for a certain plan, then you can just use those graphs right off the sheet because they're all linked in here.
All right. So as this is like the kind of like the capital budget. So one of the main sources was going to be like the free cash, which is basically how good the town does financially every year. And in a nutshell, it's like how good you did, like your revenue forecast versus the actual revenues, and the expense forecast versus the actual expenses. We had $170,000 estimated for FY18. You know, fortunately, due to the town's financial performance, they ended up with like $600 and some odd thousand in free cash for this coming year. So that will help on your capital plan. You guys can decide what you want to do with that, but I would not recommend using that towards your operating budget because it just creates problems like in future years. What happened in Braintree, for instance, we had $3 million in free cash 1 year to use it to fund the budget. The next year went down to $1 million, so that means we had to cut $2 million from the budget because it's not a recurring source of revenue. So recurring sources of revenue are your real estate taxes, your local receipts, and your state aid. Those are the sources that should use to fund your operating budget, and then the other sources of revenue should be used to fund your capital budget. And this tool is available to everybody to use, so you guys can just have fun with it. You know, trying out different scenarios.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why did you include it here recurring? You have that free cash in every year.
Well, this is the capital plan, not the.
Oh, this is.
But it's still, I mean, you're showing it recurring. If that were truth, then it would be okay to use in operating.
As far as like using free cash towards the operating, well, you're not.
Just assuming there's gonna be free cash every year.
Right. Well, there really should be free cash every year because when you do the revenue estimates, you should be conservative. So you should at least generate like 170,000.
But if you feel that way, then it could go to operating. You're saying it's going to be recurring.
Right, but it all depends on. I mean, that's like a baseline, worst case scenario, because when you're doing revenue estimates, you're not going to have like a 50-50 chance of meeting the estimates. It should be like 98% chance of meeting them. And the difference is, so that should be a baseline of free cash that technically could be considered recurring. I know what you're saying. It could be considered recurring, but I wouldn't do it that way. I would just take like 170,000 of your free cash, because free cash by definition is not a recurring source of revenue.
But we're using it in the budget here in a recurring.
Oh, that's not the budget. This is the capital budget. This is the cap.
It's still a budget though. We have to pay the
Right,
debt
right.
service.
But like I
every year.
said, we're gonna the capital budget is going to be funded by non-recurring sources of revenue for the most part.
Okay, so you're just using this for purchases, not debt service?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cash purchases.
Cash purchases and the debt service. We're going to keep the debt service level. Can you go down just a?
Yeah.
See what says, see that revenue says future debt service capacity? Timothy, can you go up just a little bit further at the top of the page? See where it says 49,900?
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference between the debt service in 17
That's true.
and the debt service in 18. So technically, you could use that for the operating budget, but you'll never catch up. So I'm kind of putting a stake in the ground
Yeah.
for 318, and each year as it goes down, that's where that revenue source.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Eric, did you want to touch on what these were? Because the CPA committee had they did see this and had questions about
Oh,
how these fall into
Yeah,
place in the capital plan.
absolutely. Those top numbers are basically just kind of like general fund budget, but there's other things that get done in the town, like road work, CPA projects, different things. So the reason I put those in there was, if you have planned road work and it's going to come from Chapter 90 money, you can put the Chapter 90 money there in the revenues and put the road work at the bottom for expenses, so you can get like a big broad picture of everything. The CPA funds, sometimes the CPA funds fund different projects like capital improvements for the town. So whatever revenues you have available for CPA funds, you could put those up there too. And then there's sometimes there's grants for capital projects. And then, for instance, that capital exclusion, if we roll back to last year, we would have put 250,000 there because you voted 250,000 to fund the ambulance. So that's basically why we put those revenue sources there.
That's right there.
Yep. So
17.
I know it's a lot to digest, but the main point that I want to.
And Rayanne has this tool with the areas that you don't want to be punching in numbers protected. That won't mess up the rest of the sheet, so she can forward it to, if you want to work on it with the board or finance committee. She has the protected sheet that you can work with and change things.
It's funny, this is like a lot of information. Somebody gave me like the metaphor of like when somebody trains you, it's like the fire hose. You get a fire hose and you can only absorb so much, so I know this is a lot. But the main point is this is a tool. One of the key challenges are that the expenses are growing at a greater rate than the revenue. But this is a tool so the town can build sustainable budgets that meet the town's needs. That's it. It's a tool that the town can use to look forward, and they can build sustainable budgets to fund what the town needs. So that is it in a nutshell. I think the PowerPoint, is the whole PowerPoint presentation on the website, or is it just that?
That is the full presentation's on the website.
Okay.
That will be, Bill Joyce will be linking that up. And then the tool is not on the website because
Right,
it
so
would
the
be
tool
only for the
probably,
financial team to use.
right. And if you have any questions as you're using the tool, you can just ask any one of us and we can like help you out. But at least it gives you a baseline as you're moving forward. Even before you get the budget requests in, you can look at the budget request and see how the forecast matches up to what the requests are. So that is it.
I've got a question. What population projections did you use? The growth projections did you use?
Oh,
From the assessor.
yeah, we used $35,000 in new growth, which is basically $2.2 million in new growth each year. So that means there'd be $2.2 million in value of new development each year. And we asked the assessors, you outsource your assessing to RRG, and that's where we got the figure from. I think it's conservative, but that's what we went for.
That represents that represents $250,000 a house. It represents a lot of houses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like 10 new houses.
No, it's more than that.
Well, two. I
$5
think.
million would be 20.
Oh, 5 million, but we only used 2 million. Can you go down to that forecast there? I think we used. I was just using it as an illustrative example. 5 million would have got 80,000, but in our forecast we only used 35,000, which was equated to like 2.2 million in new value.
All right, 2.2 million on
That's 9 houses.
9 houses.
9 houses.
And the assessors agreed with that?
That's where we got the number from. That's, yeah, 'cause-
They haven't had 9 houses a year.
right. Unless you have one nice house.
It's not mine.
Is that-
Yeah, it would include additions too, like somebody has a new shed or a garage, if it adds 20, 30,000 to it, or what have you.
Bottom line, we
They
don't
were very
go over that.
specific about that number, so I'm sure. they have it.
But that's like a good tool too, because that's, as you're reviewing, if you have this as a tool, when the assessors come up to review their budget, then you say, hey, well, we have this tool for forecast, you know, it begs the question. So now that you have all this stuff here, as the different departments come up, you can ask them.
Eric?
Yep.
You know, our town's about 60% of the budget's education. How does that compare to other towns that you work with?
Pretty much like right on the money, it is. It actually is. And the only thing that's a little tricky with some of the towns is that if it's a school budget within a town, like the health insurance for the school teachers are in the general fund budget, and then the school money is just for the school salaries, but the health insurance associated with it. But it's basically the same. It's like a third, 2/3. You know, it's kind of right on the money. As a matter of fact, I'm doing another project in, I was in Tingsboro, and they actually have a formula with their school system. How much does the town get and how much does the school get? And I think it's pretty much like 60-40 or 62-38 or whatever, and that's the formula. They say, here's our available revenues. You're going to get 62% of our new revenues. Work with it. I don't care if it's 1%, 2%, or whatever it is, and then we're going to work without the percent. So that's the policy that they do within their town.
Can you also touch on, one of the things we worked on as a group was the borrowing, where Kristen's now really organized in her treasury piece, where she has a schedule and she's some of the creative ways, I wouldn't say creative, but some of the opportunities we might have where borrowing is, you know, affordable right now, or how we talked about some different scenarios that would help. Some of that. Do you remember those conversations?
Yeah, the rates are really low, and like Kristen actually had some debt service schedules. You know, say if we had like an extra $60,000 a year over time, and then we could ask Kristen, say, all right, Kristen, if we had $60,000 available for the next 10 years, how much could we borrow? You know, could we borrow for a big, huge project? And here's the debt service schedule right here.
So on the last tab, the debt service is there, so you can see currently what Kristen has out, and where there's opportunity, right?
Yep,
So-
and the drop-off in debt, this is like the funding source for the capital budget. So the drop-off is included, and we counted any drop-off, where it goes from 323 to 273, that 49,000, that's included in the capital budget. Can you go to the capital budget?
Yep.
See that 49.9 under FY18? That's where the excess debt service is going, so it's going to fund capital projects. But that's where the opportunity is.
So this will streamline our budget development process.
And this is the exact format that you use for your budget, so it worked out pretty well. And
So Kristen,
yep, gentlemen.
You mentioned that you look back at the history of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and some of those years.
Yep.
Do you have any graphs and charts that show how we got to 17?
I didn't graph those, no.
Because, you know, Tim was very successful at getting like $1 million grant. That's a pretty big chunk of a $7 million budget. The pilots came in all in the last probably 4 years on the big solar project, and some other revenues that came in that were historically a little bump in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and it's funny, we did look back at some of like I don't know if it's in this graph, but like as far as the history of the new growth, And believe me, that average isn't 35,000 for new growth over the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, you had new growth one year of 100 and something thousand, but that's because of those solar projects.
And Tom, the grant, that's not included in any of this. That's totally
Well, I
separate.
understand, but we spent it. It was real money.
Right.
But it wasn't in our operating budget, it was spent on roads.
I know, but we spent it. It was real money. It came in the door and went out the door.
Yep. So if you go back to you go to the capital
not
plan
funny money.
forecast.
No,
No.
what are you asking then? 'Cause if we.
Well, I never got to ask my question.
All right. But basically what happened is,
Here, it was another,
You can't tell where you're going without looking at the past a little bit.
right,
I mean, you gotta really look back at the last, I would go back to 2000. It sounds crazy, but I would go back to 2000.
but one,
We've had if I could finish my sentence. We've had a lot of changes since 2000. We went to a charter government, from a more volunteer type government, elected positions type government. We had a extraordinary amount of money stolen, which has stopped being stolen and so should be realized as new income. And this basic assumption that all governments seem to run on, that expenditures will always exceed revenues. I mean, that's why we have management. That's why we have town management. In the past 8-9 years, inflation has been extraordinarily low. You go to the bank and you get 0.75% interest on your money. That doesn't sound like much, but they don't give you much because the cost of living isn't going up very fast.
that sounds like a good rate, actually.
Well, maybe it's less than that. I mean, they're talking
75
about
basis
negative rates.
Right.
And so, if we're charging along at 2.5% and the world is charging along at 1%, why is it always true that, I mean, no one has ever challenged tonight, no one has challenged the basic assumption that revenues fail to meet the demands of the expenses.
Well, that's the beauty of this this chart. If we put the percentages up there, but if you put 0% increases or negative increases up there, you could do that.
I understand that.
You could dial it back. You could dial it back 10 years.
What
Yeah.
I'm asking for
Yeah.
is what did the history show? During the period when inflation was very low, why were expenses exceeding revenues? Revenues were going up at 2.5%.
Well, Tom, our major driver has not been operating budget. So if you look back at at least the last couple of years, our operating budget has been basically level funded. We haven't been given raises in town. We haven't been adding any kind of, basically any increase in budget, significant increase in budget anywhere. The drivers are coming from health insurance, which is a huge driver every year, and education. I mean, some years we were hitting 10%, 8%, 9% increases in education.
So let me piggyback on that.
When you have a $4 or $5 million budget for education and you add 10%, those are huge numbers
Well,
every
you're
year.
talking about the history,
Right.
and so am I. I'm asking that it be projected on the wall.
I'm pretty sure you did that.
Isn't that where those
That's what
numbers
those
came
numbers
from?
are.
Yes,
It's
Is that what
10%.
you populated the
Yes,
tool with in the
yes.
first place, is based on that
I don't
history?
see
right,
any
and we
history
removed
projected.
erratic differences, like we can't
Right.
depend on one-time instances that happen. We had to extract them from historical data in order to kind of see what realistic trends would be.
But if I can just add, Tom, or, I guess generally. So what we did, I guess it's probably a year plus now, is we wanted to be able to project forward as well.
I
Looking at
understand
the-
I'm at a
No,
forecast meeting.
but we're so contingent upon the number coming from the Quabbin district that when we went to them and said, we want a 5-year plan, and they said, we can't really do that. We're like, well, we can't do anything without having some sort of a plan, a 5-year plan, capital purchases, all this sort of stuff. That got the 5 towns together. We had all 5 boards of selectmen sign a letter to send it to the schools to be able to provide something to us, and they still said, you know what, we really still kind of can't do that. Let's start this task force that we've been on for a year, trying to figure that out, because it's such a huge driver for everything that we've got, and it only seems to be getting worse. So I couldn't agree more. The history stuff, and I think it seems to me like,
I understand I'm at a forecast meeting, and that's not really part of history. But I'm just wondering if we have this much talent in the room, could someone put together some history?
Yeah, it definitely can be done. We have all the data. That would be a project to be done, if you felt it would be valuable for you to have. That would depend on what direction you guys wanted to go in.
Yeah.
That's beyond our project scope
I understand,
for this one.
and I'd appreciate it. I don't know if anyone else values it, but you gotta figure out how you got here.
Hey, the other question, why can't you
No
force
business.
why can't the town vote to force the school to give you a 5-year projection? Is that, or why can't our school committee members, why can't we put pressure on the school committee members to do that?
We can, I mean, Bill, you wanna?
Well, the financing changes from next year to year. Like this year, we had a couple of kids move into the district who had a huge cost in special education.
Like hundreds of
There's a
thousands.
different, yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a different governor, so there's changes in how much money the state gives us. So at the school committee, we can't predict anything either.
Well,
Live
They
within your
can.
budget.
they just
Goodness, if you don't
projected
have
it.
the money, you can't give it to them.
I hear ya, I know, I mean, it's,
That's,
we talk about it all the
that's how
time.
everybody else has to live. Whatever paycheck comes in, that's what you live on.
I mean, you could take that special
It's
education
time for
budget.
the towns to say, this is what you have to live on.
But when you get an extra bill of $1.2 million because of special education, randomly, that's unfunded, that's not some, I hear you say that, theoretically, I hear you, but when it's so huge, and we're such little towns with so little money, you can't just say that, because everything just gets cut. So
Yeah.
it's,
One thing that's supposed to mitigate those special education increases is like the circuit breaker. So I'm not sure if the circuit breaker revenue on these extra kids are kicking in and giving any more money to the district. Does that, are you familiar with the circuit breaker? No, there is a circuit breaker. It's a state
Yep.
fund that mitigates big, huge increases. So that does mitigate a little bit of the special ed costs for the school.
yeah, not enough, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Local drops off.
Yeah. But that is it.
So how do we change the funding for special ed? I like that kids get what they need, but that kind of cost is gonna break all of us.
State Department of Education, straight from Boston, you know, that's how it
The
changes.
federal government walked away from funding it. They don't fund, when everything was decided, they pledged that they'd pay like 30%, and they have not paid
And we're screwed.
anything. Yeah.
Tom?
I remember there was a meeting in June where it was thought that sometime in August, representatives of the district or the town were going to go to the state level government and plead a case. Anything ever happen?
Yeah, we're still working on that. Rand, do you have an update on that?
Thursday evening is a meeting with, it's not the governor, but it's Ann Goby and other legislatures up at Quabbin.
Okay.
Good. Another question.
Yes, go ahead.
Amy, could I beg you to go back to the slide of decreasing debt service? You know the one.
Yep.
It
Going
shows
back.
debt in 2000,
This one?
2018. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you levelized that from the 270 number.
Actually, from a number higher than that, that's projected, it was 349,000 above that. Like
Yeah,
300
2017.
Right, was the baseline, yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
And you generated a difference between that amount and future amounts that represents a kind of a value above the line, so to speak.
Exactly.
And I think that's totally arbitrary.
It is.
You could have chosen $1 million or 270,000.
Well, the reason I chose 17 is because your budget was balanced in 17. So that's we
But wasn't
used it
the
as,
budget balanced in 16?
well, it's kind of right. But if say if the debt service was 500,000 higher in 16 than 17, then if we use 16 as a arbitrator, then that would have blew another $500,000 hole in your 18 budget. So that's why I used 17, because it was balanced in 17, which projecting out from 17.
Well, as long as the future year is less
Yeah.
than the present, than the year you choose.
Right. So
But this amount of power that you generate, borrowing power, is as you projected it on the board, is based on something. But
Yeah,
it is indeed
it's
completely arbitrary.
Yeah, it's not, well, this is what it's based on, you can determine if it's arbitrary or not. It's based upon what you paid for debt in your budget this year. That's what it's
17.
based upon. I could have picked $8 million, I could have picked year 1919, I could have picked whatever. It is arbitrary, but that's the number that I picked.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that include CPA borrowing?
No, it does not. Can
I
you,
think the last one
let me
was
see. I don't believe it does. Let's see.
18. Oh, I just closed the darn thing.
So,
So the last was 17, it did include, but 18 and forward, they don't have.
yeah, it doesn't, I put the CPA separate, it doesn't include, I have the CPA debt service
Yeah.
below that, so it does not include CPA.
How does this compare to other towns of debt service, the amount of debt service?
Let's
Other
see.
towns around us?
Not sure about the towns around you. Usually, like 5% of your total budget, the debt service is, pretty good. And I think you're well below. I think so. We got a budget of like. Let's see what the total bottom line is. Total operating budget, like say 8 million. So 5% of that, so got 800,000, 400,000. So yeah, you're probably right, kind of right in the ballpark. You're like three, you got about 3 to 5% of your budget is for the debt service. So it's the other thing, Kristen, you received the bond rating, didn't you? The town gets rated when it borrows money from a bond rating, and they look at some of those ratios. And I think it was within the range that they expected it to be. It might have even been favorable. Yeah, the bond rating was higher. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
But as you borrow new money, you can put the debt service schedule where it says add new debt service here. So self-explanatory, but that's where you'd put it as you get new debt.
Tom?
How did the stopping of the difficulty we have with the tax collector impact this? I believe that could have been as much as $250,000 a year, starting in maybe 14 or 15 and running through today. That was realized money. That's as if we brought in a 50% more industrial or more commercial tax revenue. Commercial tax revenue is about 500,000. This was, it's a pretty big piece.
Well, basically, when you project out your budgets and your revenue, you're counting on collecting all the money. You basically count on collecting all the money. So whether you had problems with the money or not, your budget's based upon that. But what happened was the collection rate was down. So what you actually budgeted and what you actually received was less than what you budgeted. And hence, that's why your free cash numbers were really down. I forget what it was last year. It was like 200,000. So
No, it's higher than that. 427.
was it 420?
Well, correct. That was,
Yeah, 427. Yeah, because we
because
recertified it.
yeah.
You recertified it. But that's where that
but
would.
it was in the 200s that year prior.
The year prior.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's. So when that money starts to get collected back to the town, that helps out your free cash. But I'm saying.
Do you have to go back and pay those years that the money was taken?
All right, so say if you borrow, your budget's based upon collecting $7 million in taxes. You got $7 million. No matter what, that number's going to change. What's going to happen is, if you only collect $6.8 million of that, then you're $200,000 short in your revenue shortfall. So that's basically falls. If you're a business, that falls a negative to your bottom line, which is technically like your free cash. Free cash is equivalent to retained earnings in a business. Same thing. It's basically fund balance that the state says you can spend. So I would expect those free cash numbers to be higher now that more money's getting collected.
But that goes back to the finance committee's question is, why wouldn't you use that increased number as part of your budget? Because obviously you didn't have that money for several years.
Well, no matter what, the finance committee was always using the higher number anyways in their budget. But no matter what, they were using the higher number. But I guess what you could say is your projected free cash could be higher because you collected more money, you know, every year. And that might allow you to be a little bit more aggressive in your local receipt estimates too, knowing that you collected more money.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm sure this is going to be valuable moving forward.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, that concludes our agenda items besides public and press question and answer. Anybody have any questions?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:45.
There's a second.
My driveway? Second it.
Discussion? All in favor? Yes.